welcome to Haptik Customer First, presented by CNBC TV18.com. I'm Shibani Gharat. The pandemic has dramatically changed the way people shop, and from the looks of it, we might not go back to our old ways. This has also been enabled by online retailers who have accelerated the way customers and businesses approach online shopping. Today, we speak to Kirti Varun Avasarala, who is the Chief Product Officer at Meesho. Welcome to the show, Kirti.
Thanks a lot, Shivani, for having me.
Kirti, the e-tail industry has seen a boom in growth since the pandemic and the opening of the lockdown. Brands that couldn't reach customers without an offline presence have finally made the move to digital. How has this transition been made easy for those sellers by Meesho?
Yeah, sure. I think it's definitely interesting topic to discuss. I think one thing that we have seen in the last few years is that, especially post the pandemic, I think the growth in e-commerce has been exponential in India, and in many ways, I think the pandemic is analogous to what demonetization did for digital payments, right? And we have seen a huge surge of growth, and multiple e-commerce platforms and even Meesho has seen significant growth. And this has been driven by both consumers and even sellers feeling much more comfortable in sort of buying and selling online, right? So that has very clearly happened. Talking specifically about sellers and what I think we have done at Meesho, I think there are a few things which I think have really helped us. One, I think, is probably a real breakthrough in the e-commerce industry, which is making commission 0% for sellers. So Meesho is the first Indian e-commerce platform to do this, and other platforms are now getting inspired by this and following suit. And what this has enabled us to do is to make the cost of doing business for a small seller very low, right? So that they don't feel any barrier in selling online as compared to selling offline, which they were doing. So I think that sort of probably is one of the biggest things that has enabled us to get more sellers on board on a platform. I think that's number one. Second thing, which also I think we have probably been able to do quite well from a seller perspective, is also to make Meesho a very simple and friendly e-commerce platform for them to engage in. What I mean by that is, for example, some of the interfaces that we provide to them for them to register as a seller or upload their products online, or even sort of look at data on how their business is going. Almost all of those things are very simple in nature. They've been built and optimized for small sellers. And a lot of sellers firstly call out our cataloging process, right? The process of listing a product to be the most friendly among all commerce platforms in India. So I think that's another thing that we've invested in quite a bit, which also I think has helped these small sellers. I think the third part also is an area that we've invested in significantly, is providing more intelligence to these sellers on how to manage their business. So typically when a seller is running an offline business, they have ways of knowing how much prices should I set, how much should my margin be, right? How should I trade off growth versus profitability? Like all of those things, they have ways of doing that in the offline world. What we have done is to sort of build the online version of those kinds of tools. So recommendations on pricing, recommendations on what items to list, also giving them a sense on what items sell well on a platform versus not. So all of these intelligence layer, I would call it, also I think has helped a lot of these small sellers succeed online and definitely on Meesho. So I think I would call out these three as I think the big things that at least we have done to get more and more sellers on board and make them successful.
Kirti, also so many times it happens that I might be a loyal customer of one of these brands, like a particular brand, and the brand or the seller might be online, but I'm not able to reach that brand and the seller online. So how is Meesho working towards bridging this gap between the two?
I think that's a good question, and the way we look at this is, see, we're a pure play marketplace, which means the goal here is to get more and more customers which is demand, and then which sort of drives more supply, which is sellers. And this is like a flywheel. So more supply leads to more demand and vice versa, right? And today, if I look at the demand side, uh, more than 50% of the customers who come to Meesho as new customers are all people who are engaging with e-commerce for the first time, right? So that I think is a very, very big proportion and probably larger than any other commerce platform. I think the same applies even on the seller side. So if you look at our seller base, we have probably the most diversified seller base, which means that people who have very large businesses, then people who have medium-sized businesses, and people who are also really small or micro sellers who probably were only selling on Facebook or WhatsApp earlier. So we have all of those three, and most of our new sellers who are coming online are again people who are the small sellers, right? So what therefore what it does is, even if there is a customer who may sort of be transacting offline with a certain seller, there's a very high likelihood that that seller will also come online on Meesho. And there's an easy way for customers to even recognize that, because we are one of the very few e-commerce platforms who promote seller identity on the platform, right? So to give you an example, if you go and buy something on any other e-commerce platform, you know that you're buying it from that platform, but
Hmm.
you don't know which seller you're buying it from,
Correct.
right? Whereas in Meesho, I think it's slightly different. Here, the seller identity is something
Hmm.
that we are trying to put at the forefront, which means that
Hmm.
you know that while you have bought it through Meesho, but you have bought this seller's product. So this
Correct.
is something that we have built over the last year, and we also have storefronts for these sellers, which means if you go to Meesho and choose a seller, you can see all of the items of that seller on the app, right, in one page, for example.
Correct.
So
Correct.
these are all the things that we have done to ensure that that
Hmm.
identity of the seller becomes very visible to customers. And as more and more of these offline sellers come online, then automatically even customers can discover them, right? So that's sort of how we've looked at it.
And yes, Kirti, the customer experiences of online retailers can decide the future of the platform instantly. Can you tell us how is Meesho navigating this critical process of making sure that they get new customers and those customers stick to the platform, because that is critically important?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've invested in a lot of initiatives around what we call engagement and retention, right, for these customers that we're acquiring. I think what is important to understand is Meesho is focused on the Bharat part of India, right? So tier two and beyond. That's sort of more than 90% of our customer base. So for these customers, one unique sort of insight around them is they have actually time on their hand, and they're
Hmm.
willing to engage with online apps, right? And we've seen that with the video and other social networking apps that they spend time on. So time is not a constraint for them, which means that what we have to do to engage and retain them is to provide them experiences on the app where they can actually come and spend time over and above the core shopping itself, which is what they're trying to do, right?
Can you give
So
can you give one or two examples of this?
yeah, absolutely. I think a couple of things are very unique in Meesho. I think one is, if you see on our app, you will find something called a community, right? So this community is actually like a social feed on the app, and it has nothing to do with just shopping. It has actually more to do with customers sharing insights with each other. It also provides us, the Meesho team, a platform to run quizzes, polls, and other things to engage with these customers. So everything sort of slightly adjacent to shopping and not core shopping, right? So we see very high engagement with this community, right? This is one of the reasons why these customers keep coming back to the Meesho app, even if they don't have a shopping need per se. I think that's one. The second thing that you'll also find on our app, which is probably different from many commerce apps, is also the level of gamification is very high, right? Which means that you will find leaderboards, you will find actually mini games, you will also find other rewards related features where you have different milestones, and if you cross that as a customer by doing some actions, then you get rewards. So all of these are elements that we have built in with the intent to engage and retain, right? Over and above some of the core shopping experience elements that are there. I think that's sort of one big lever. I think the other thing that also we have invested a lot in to ensure customers stick to our platform is also around customer communications. So the platform that we've built is able to, for example, send push notifications, but also personalize them, the volume of how many you send to a particular customer, what kind of notification do you send, which is unique for that customer, which is different from others. So all of those are again things that we've invested in, which enable us to drive that stickiness of customers with our app.
Kirti, over the past 2 years, there has been so much of transformation in consumer habits. Like, for example, 2 years ago, I personally would have never imagined buying fruits online. Is an example that I would like to give. So, what are those trends that are here to stay, and the key prominent trends that you have witnessed on your platform on how consumers are behaving, and how will it actually shape the future?
Yeah, sure. And I think the best way to actually understand this is to take a slightly macro picture of e-commerce itself in India. So today, if you see, e-commerce penetration in India overall is about, I think, 5 to 6%, right? And this was like 1-2% a few years back. So it's definitely grown, but still it's in the mid single digits, which means that the opportunity to grow is much higher. The other lens to take to this number is also the category cut. Like if you look at penetration in mobile phones, smartphones, and so on, it's I think close to 40%. Whereas the penetration, online penetration in grocery is less than 1%. And these two are like at the ends of the spectrum, and all other categories come in the middle, right? And the same analogy applies even to customer segments. The penetration in metro tier one is very high, but if you look at tier two and beyond, it is much lower, but it is growing fast. So all of the new trends will be around serving these different customer segments and also creating experiences for different categories, right? And with that in mind, I think there are a few trends which I see for sure will dominate the next few years of commerce. I think one is more uh, prominence of video and live streaming commerce, right? So this is basically a way for customers to engage in a commerce experience or a shopping experience through a video, and more specifically a live video. This is almost like the TV demos that we used to have in the 90s, right? Where,
Correct.
where people used to watch the demo, then call and try to buy. The same is replicated in a fully online form where you can chat with the person who's doing the demo and then literally buy the product when that live stream is happening. So I think that's a very, very big trend, and I think it will really take off. And it solves for penetration of categories like beauty, right? Where you can never look at an image and buy something. You need to see how it looks on you or somebody else who's applying it and understand more detailed features of the product and so on. I think that's one big trend. I think the second trend that I see is actually on the grocery side, which is grocery penetration. Because it is so low, I think it definitely has lots of opportunities, and we will see companies trying to go towards what we call community group buying models, which is a bunch of people pooling together and buying something, because grocery is a very low price and low basket size category, which means that if you try to deliver just two oranges to somebody, then the cost is so high that you can't run that business. But if you're able to aggregate a lot of orders, then that business starts making sense, right? And this is something that we are also doing in Meesho as part of our new business called Meesho. But I think this is a much broader trend. I think you will see more and more players, especially taking to this in tier two and beyond geographies significantly. I think that's the second one. I think the third big trend that I see is a lot of data science being used in the core shopping experience on the e-commerce apps, which means that till date, I think most customers tend to have a similar experience, right? So if you go to an e-commerce app, you look at the homepage, you look at the pages after that, broadly everything looks similar. Whether you look at it or I look at it, is almost the same. But now I think what we're seeing more and more of is what we call personalization, which is very deep in nature, which is many of these steps in the journey will look very different for you compared to me, because the platform has much more data about you, and they also know what the affinity of different categories is that you have and so on. So I think that entire personalization enabled by ML AI algorithms, I think is also going to reach a much higher level of sophistication compared to sort of what we have seen till now. So to me, I think these probably are the three big trends that will shape the core commerce experience for customers.
Okay.
Kirti, about 2 years ago, when the pandemic had hit us, we had to grapple with, let's say, 5 years of disruption in a matter of couple of weeks. Let's say today, how good or bad is the online retail industry prepared for the disruptions of the future, like example in terms of tech interventions, etc., in the coming days?
Yeah, I think this preparedness or the awareness of being prepared is definitely much higher now because of COVID. I think 2 years back, nobody even thought that there can be any disruption of this nature. Uh, Having said that, I think a lot of the preparedness now is also around certain kinds of disruption, right? One is COVID type disruption, which is more around supply chain disruption and maybe some user sort of behavior disruptions. I think there a lot of commerce companies, even Meesho, I think we have a fairly clear playbook on how to handle that if it happens again, for example. The other kinds of disruptions around newer categories that customers want to buy online, I think there is some way to go. For example, what we haven't seen happen online a lot is people don't buy automobiles online, right? People don't buy houses online as much, right? So there are still certain categories of what we call retail consumption, which haven't fully moved online. So those are the, if there are companies which come and disrupt that, then that is definitely an area which I don't think a lot of companies today are very prepared for, right? So those are some sort of kinds of disruptions which probably preparedness is low, but the core behavior, consumer behavior that we see, the core supply chain disruptions that we have seen, I think there the level of preparedness is very high, I would say.
Before we wrap up, Kirti, can you tell us what are the key tech interventions that Meesho has incorporated into its platform to serve the evolving consumer needs and consumer behavior in the future?
Yeah, I think Meesho has always been a very tech-first company, and we always look at solving all problems through technology as opposed to processes or operations. So that's been in the DNA of the company since the time it started. If I specifically look to the last couple of years, I think there are many sort of technology innovations, I would say, that Meesho has pioneered. I think the one which probably is the biggest of them is the size of the Meesho Android app is 14 MB. Right? To put that in context, if you see most other commerce apps or even apps adjacent in adjacent industries, their size is 40 MB or even higher, sometimes more than 50 as well. And this to us is a very important lever in unlocking the Bharat user base, because those customers do sort of struggle with storage on their phones, and that's sort of something that we had understood, and then we optimized the app so much that it's at 14 MB. So this I think is a very, very big innovation that we did, and there's a lot of things under the hood there, right? Optimizing source code files, compressing images, looking at different ways of having the APK structured. So multiple things under the hood, but I think that sort of is one big intervention. I think the second big thing that we've done in technology, again, in the last couple of years, is invest very highly in data science, right, to solve a lot of the core business problems. For example, I spoke earlier about personalization, recommendations, but even outside of that, we have things, for example, like predicting out of stock on the platform, so that and so that we can restock inventory or give recommendations to sellers to restock at the right time. That's a data science problem. Similarly, we invested a lot in predicting and curbing fraud, right, on the platform. We also have built a lot of capabilities in e-commerce advertising around relevance of ads, etc., which again is a data science problem. So I think a lot of investments in data science to sort of solve problems, I think, is something that we've done. And if you again look under the hood, there are lots of complex algorithms, collaborative filtering, deep learning, etc., that our teams have deployed, and all of that has helped us sort of solve a lot of these problems through technology. I think the third point I will highlight, which I think normally probably is tough to see from the outside, is actually the investments in data infrastructure. Right. So Meesho has grown so much, like close to 40x in the last year and a half. And when that kind of growth happens, the data that you collect grows at an even higher rate than that. Right. So today we ingest close to 300 billion events every day, right, of different data that's appearing on Meesho app. So processing all of this data and building analytical engines on this data, which helps in many other things. I think that's also something that we've been able to do in a very short time frame compared to what most companies would have experienced earlier. So to me, that also
Correct.
is a big technology innovation that has happened. So yeah, I think I would call out these three, but overall, in general, the philosophy and DNA of the company is very tech first.
Thank you, Kirti. Thanks for joining us today and for this insightful conversation.
Thanks a lot, Shibani. Thanks for having me. It was great chatting with you.
That was Kirti Varun sharing with us how prepared is Meesho to serve the evolving customer needs and consumer behavior in the future. Thank you for watching Haptik Customer First, presented by CNBC TV18.com. Goodbye.